The theft of the Mona Lisa from the Louvre Museum on August 21, 1911, stands as a seminal event in art security history, exposing the systemic vulnerabilities of early 20th century museum administration. The perpetrator was Vincenzo Peruggia, an Italian glazier and former Louvre employee who had previously worked on the protective glass case for the painting. Peruggia's methodology relied on intimate knowledge of the museum's maintenance schedules and a lack of continuous surveillance. On the day of the theft, the museum was closed for cleaning. Peruggia entered the building around 7 a.m. through the door used by workers. He was wearing a white smock, the standard uniform for museum maintenance staff, which allowed him to blend in with other employees. Peruggia waited in the salon car until the room was empty, then removed the painting, which weighed approximately 20 pounds due to its wooden panel and frame. He carried the artwork to a nearby service staircase, where he dismantled the frame and protective glass case. The frame was abandoned in the stairwell. Peruggia then wrapped the panel in his smock and exited the museum through the same door he had entered. The theft was not discovered until the following day, when a painter arrived to sketch the gallery and noticed the empty space on the wall. Security initially assumed the painting had been removed for photography. The painting remained missing for 2 years, hidden in the false bottom of a trunk in Peruggia's Paris apartment, until he attempted to sell it to an art dealer in Florence in December 1913. The Black Sox scandal refers to the conspiracy to fix the 1919 World Series between the Chicago White Sox and the Cincinnati Reds. The operation was primarily facilitated by professional gamblers, notably Joseph "Sport" Sullivan and potentially the organized crime figure Arnold Rothstein, although Rothstein's direct financial involvement remains a subject of historical debate. The conspiracy involved 8 players from the White Sox roster: Eddie Cicotte, Claude "Lefty" Williams, Chick Gandil, Swede Risberg, Buck Weaver, Joe Jackson, Happy Felsch, and Fred McMullin. The motivation for the players was largely economic. They were severely underpaid by the team owner, Charles Comiskey, despite being one of the best teams in baseball. The mechanics of the fix involved the pitchers, Cicotte and Williams, intentionally throwing games. The signal that the fix was on occurred in the first inning of Game 1, when Cicotte hit the first batter, Maury Rath, with a pitch. Over the course of the 8-game series, a best-of-9 format that year, the players performed suboptimally at critical junctures. Suspicion arose almost immediately among sports writers due to the unusual betting odds, which shifted dramatically in favor of the underdog Reds before the series began. A grand jury investigation was convened in 1920. While the players were acquitted in a criminal trial, partly due to vanished confessions and legal maneuvering, the newly appointed Commissioner of Baseball, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, permanently banned all 8 accused players from professional baseball to restore public confidence in the sport's integrity. On September 16, 1920, a horse-drawn wagon exploded outside the J.P. Morgan Bank building at 23 Wall Street in New York City's financial district. The detonation occurred at 12:01 p.m., a time chosen to maximize casualties during the lunch rush. The device consisted of approximately 100 pounds of dynamite and 500 pounds of cast-iron sash weights, which acted as shrapnel. The blast killed 38 people and injured more than 143, causing significant structural damage to the Morgan building and the interior of the stock exchange across the street. The total financial damage was estimated at $2 million in 1920 currency. The investigation, led by the Bureau of Investigation, the precursor to the FBI, focused on radical anarchist groups, specifically the Galleanists, followers of Luigi Galleani. This suspicion was based on flyers found in a nearby mailbox shortly before the explosion, which threatened free political prisoners or face death. Despite a massive manhunt and the interrogation of hundreds of suspects, no individual was ever charged with the crime. Forensic analysis of the wagon and the horse's shoes provided limited leads. The wagon was identified as coming from a specific stable, but the renter had used a pseudonym. The Wall Street bombing remains officially unsolved, though historical consensus attributes it to Italian anarchists retaliating for the indictment of Sacco and Vanzetti. The Rondout train robbery, executed on June 12, 1924, remains the largest train robbery in United States history. The operation was planned and carried out by the Newton Brothers gang, Willis, Doc, Jess, and Joe, along with two associates, Brent Glasscock and Herbert Holliday. The target was a Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul mail train. An insider tip informed the gang that the train would be carrying a significant shipment of cash and registered mail from the Federal Reserve Bank. The heist took place near Rondout, Illinois. The logistical execution of the robbery was precise. The gang boarded the train at a designated stop and forced the engineer to halt the locomotive at a specific remote location where their getaway cars were waiting. To breach the armored mail car, the robbers utilized tear gas bombs and gas masks, forcing the clerks to surrender without a prolonged gunfight. In the confusion, Doc Newton was accidentally shot by one of his own accomplices, a logistical error that would later aid in their capture. The haul totaled approximately $3 million in cash, jewelry, and securities. The investigation by postal inspectors identified the gang through the medical treatment sought for Doc Newton's gunshot wound. The subsequent recovery of the stolen assets was substantial, and the Newton brothers were sentenced to varying prison terms. The murder of 14-year-old Bobby Franks by Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb on May 21, 1924, was conceived as an intellectual exercise to demonstrate the feasibility of a perfect crime. Leopold and Loeb were wealthy, intellectually gifted students at the University of Chicago who were infatuated with Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch, Superman, believing themselves to be above the law and conventional morality. The planning phase lasted 7 months, during which they established a complex system of alibis, rented a vehicle under a false name, and prepared a ransom demand to divert suspicion towards a kidnapping for-profit motive. The mechanics of the crime involved luring Franks, a neighbor and acquaintance, into their rented Willie's Night automobile. Loeb struck Franks with a chisel, and the victim was subsequently suffocated. They drove the body to a remote area near Wolf Lake in Hammond, Indiana, poured hydrochloric acid on the face and genitals to hinder identification, and hid the corpse in a drainage culvert. The perfect crime unraveled due to a single piece of forensic evidence, a pair of eyeglasses found near the body. The glasses had a unique hinge mechanism sold to only 3 people in the Chicago area, one of whom was Nathan Leopold. During interrogation, their alibis collapsed. The subsequent trial became a spectacle due to the defense strategy of Clarence Darrow, who argued against the death penalty based on determinism and psychological pathology. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, occurring on February 14, 1929, was the culmination of a gang war between Al Capone's South Side Gang and George Bugs Moran's North Side Gang for control of organized crime in Chicago. The tactical objective was the elimination of Moran and his key lieutenants. The ambush took place at the SMC Cartage Company garage at 2122 North Clark Street. The hit squad consisted of 4 men. 2 were dressed in police uniforms, and 2 in civilian clothing. This use of police disguises was a critical psychological tactic, inducing the 7 victims inside the garage to surrender their weapons and line up against the wall, assuming a routine raid. Once the victims were positioned, the assailants opened fire with 2 Thompson submachine guns and a shotgun. 70 rounds of ammunition were expended. The victims included 5 of Moran's associates, a mechanic, and an optician who associated with the gang. Bugs Moran himself was not present. He had arrived late, saw the police car outside, and fled, assuming a raid was in progress. The forensic ballistics investigation was pioneered by Calvin Goddard, who used the spent casings to prove that the weapons used were not police-issued, but rather belonged to the assailants. This event marked a turning point in public opinion against organized crime and led to increased federal intervention in Chicago. The kidnapping of Charles Lindbergh Jr. on March 1, 1932, involved the abduction of the 20-month-old son of the aviator Charles Lindbergh from his home in East Amwell, New Jersey. The perpetrator entered the second-story nursery using a homemade ladder, which was left at the scene. A ransom note demanding $50,000 was found on the windowsill. The logistical focus of the subsequent investigation centered on two main pieces of evidence: the ladder and the ransom money. The ladder was constructed of poor-quality pine but was designed with a unique dismantling mechanism for transport. Xylatomists, wood experts, later traced the wood to a specific lumber yard in the Bronx. The ransom was paid on April 2, 1932, in gold certificates, the serial numbers of which had been recorded. Despite the payment, the child was not returned. The body was discovered on May 12 in a wooded area near the Lindbergh estate. Forensic analysis indicated death had occurred almost immediately due to a massive skull fracture. The breakthrough in the case came in September 1934, when a gas station attendant noted the license plate of a man using a gold certificate to pay for fuel. This led to the arrest of Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a German carpenter. A search of his garage revealed $14,000 of the ransom money. Ballistics and wood grain analysis linked his tools to the ladder construction, leading to his conviction and execution. The ambush of Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow on May 23, 1934, was a law enforcement operation coordinated by former Texas Ranger Captain Frank Harmer. After a 2-year crime spree spanning multiple states, Harmer tracked the couple's movements to Bienville Parish, Louisiana, by analyzing their travel patterns and social network. He deduced they were utilizing a circle route to visit family members. Harmer assembled a posse of 6 officers from Texas and Louisiana and set up a roadside ambush on Highway 154, near the town of Gippsland. The tactical plan relied on surprise and overwhelming firepower. The officers positioned themselves in the brush overlooking the road. At approximately 9:15 a.m., Barrow and Parker approached in a stolen 1934 Ford, the 5th 8. Harmer had enlisted the help of Ivy Methvin, the father of gang member Henry Methvin, whom he positioned on the road with his truck to force Barrow to slow down. As the car decelerated, the posse opened fire without warning. The engagement lasted less than a minute but expended approximately 130 rounds of ammunition. Forensic reports state that Barrow and Parker were each struck by more than 50 bullets. The operation highlighted the shift from local law enforcement to coordinated, interstate manhunts. The killing of John Dillinger on July 22, 1934, marked the end of the FBI's Public Enemy No. 1 campaign. The operation was led by Melvin Purvis, the head of the Chicago FBI office. The intelligence leading to Dillinger's location came from Anna Companys, also known as Anna Sage, a Romanian brothel owner facing deportation. Hoping to secure legal residency, she informed the FBI that she would be attending a movie with Dillinger at the Biograph Theater on Lincoln Avenue. She agreed to wear an orange dress, often misremembered as red, to serve as a visual marker for the agents. The logistical setup involved surrounding the theater with federal agents and local police. As Dillinger exited the theater at approximately 10:30 p.m., Purvis lit a cigar, the prearranged signal to close in. Dillinger, sensing the trap, attempted to draw a .380 Colt pistol and flee into an alley. 3 agents fired 5 shots. Dillinger was struck 3 times. The fatal shot entered the back of his neck, severed his spinal cord, and exited under his right eye. He died at the scene. The event was a significant propaganda victory for J. Edgar Hoover's Bureau of Investigation, legitimizing its expanded jurisdiction and resources. The murder of Elizabeth Short, known posthumously as the Black Dahlia, occurred on or around January 15, 1947. Her body was discovered in a vacant lot in the Limerick Park neighborhood of Los Angeles. The condition of the body indicated a high degree of surgical precision or anatomical knowledge on the part of the killer. The corpse had been hemicorporectomized, severed in half, at the waist, specifically between the second and third lumbar vertebrae. The body was completely drained of blood, and the intestines had been removed and tucked beneath the buttocks. There were lacerations on the face extending from the corners of the mouth to the ears, creating a Glasgow smile. The investigation was one of the largest in lapped history, generating thousands of leads and suspects. The forensic evidence suggested the murder had taken place elsewhere, as there was no blood at the discovery site. The body had been washed and posed. Despite the extensive media coverage and over 50 false confessions, no one was ever charged. Suspects included Dr. George Hodel, a physician with the surgical skills necessary to perform the mutilation, whose own son later accused him of the crime. The case remains a prominent example of a cold case where the saturation of media coverage may have compromised the integrity of the investigation by contaminating witness testimony and evidence. The case of the Somerton Man, also known as the Tamam Shud case, formally began on December 1, 1948, at approximately 6:30 a.m., when the body of an unidentified male was discovered on Somerton Park Beach, just south of Adelaide, South Australia. The deceased was a male of indeterminate age, likely mid-40s, approximately 180 centimeters tall, with grey eyes and hair of a ginger-grey coloration. The initial police report noted that the man was dressed in a white shirt, tie, brown trousers, socks, and shoes, and a brown knitted pullover and grey-brown double-breasted jacket. Notably, all labels had been removed from the clothing. The body showed no signs of violence or struggle. A half-smoked cigarette was resting on the right collar of his coat, held in position by the cheek, suggesting he had died while slumped against the seawall. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. John Dwyer, estimated the time of death at roughly 2 a.m. on December 1. The pathology revealed significant congestion in the liver and spleen, and the stomach contained blood mixed with the remains of a pasty. Dr. Dwyer concluded that death was likely due to heart failure induced by poisoning, though tests for common poisons like strychnine and cyanide returned negative results. The complexity of the case escalated on January 14, 1949, when a brown suitcase was discovered at the Adelaide railway station cloakroom. The ticket indicated it had been deposited on November 30th, the day before the discovery of the body. The suitcase contained thread that matched the orange thread used to repair the dead man's trousers, linking the luggage to the corpse. In June 1949, a scrap of paper with the phrase Tamam Shud, Persian for "it is finished," was found rolled up in a hidden fob pocket within the dead man's trousers. The paper was torn from a specific edition of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. Police launched a public search for the book, which was eventually turned in by a man who found it in the back seat of his car, parked near Somerton Beach. The book contained a cipher of letters and a phone number. The phone number belonged to a nurse living nearby, Jessica Thompson, referred to as Jestin, who denied knowing the man but appeared visibly distressed upon seeing a plaster cast of his bust. The cipher has never been officially decoded. In 2022, DNA analysis tentatively identified the man as Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne, though the circumstances of his death and presence in Adelaide remain a matter of conjecture. The Great Brinks Robbery, executed on January 17, 1950, in Boston, Massachusetts, was at the time the largest armed robbery in United States history. The target was the Brinks Incorporated armored car depot at 165 Prince Street in the North End. The operation was the result of nearly 2 years of surveillance and planning led by Joseph Big Joe McGinnis and Anthony Pino. The gang, comprising 11 men in total, approached the heist as a military operation. They stole the plans for the depot's alarm system and returned them before the theft was noticed. Over the course of the planning phase, members of the gang entered the facility on several occasions after hours to map the layout, utilizing a key they had fabricated from a lock cylinder temporarily removed from a door. On the evening of the robbery, 7 men entered the building at 6:55 p.m., wearing navy pea coats, chauffeur caps, and rubber Halloween masks, specifically of Captain Marvel and other characters, to obscure their identities. They used the copied keys to navigate 5 locked doors until they reached the counting room on the 2nd floor. Inside, 5 Brinks employees were processing the day's receipts. The robbers surprised the staff, bound them with rope, and gagged them with adhesive tape. They systematically emptied the cages of cash, checks, and securities. The entire operation inside the building took approximately 30 minutes. The haul consisted of $1,218,211.29 in cash and $1,557,183.83 in checks, money orders, and other securities. The investigation by the FBI and Massachusetts State Police was exhaustive but initially fruitless. The breakthrough did not come from forensic evidence but from internal dissent within the gang. One of the conspirators, Joseph Specs O'Keefe, was imprisoned for an unrelated burglary. Feeling that his share of the loot was being misappropriated by the other members to pay for legal fees, and surviving an assassination attempt ordered by the gang, O'Keefe turned state's evidence in January 1956. This was merely days before the statute of limitations for the robbery was set to expire. His detailed testimony provided the necessary corroboration to indict the remaining members. 8 of the robbers were convicted and received life sentences. Only a small fraction of the stolen cash was ever recovered, leading to speculation that it was hidden in the hills of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, or laundered through legitimate businesses. The theft of the Stone of Scone, or Stone of Destiny, from Westminster Abbey on December 25, 1950, was a political act carried out by 4 Scottish students from the University of Glasgow: Ian Hamilton, Gavin Vernon, Kay Matheson, and Alan Stewart. The stone, a block of red sandstone used for centuries in the coronation of Scottish monarchs, had been taken by Edward I of England in 1296 and placed under the coronation chair. The students aimed to repatriate the symbol to Scotland to rally support for Scottish Home Rule. The logistics of the removal were amateur but effective due to the minimal security at the Abbey on Christmas Day. Hamilton had previously hidden inside the Abbey to map the layout but was caught by a night watchman. However, he was merely escorted out rather than arrested, allowing him to return. On the night of the theft, the group entered through a side door at the Poets' Corner, which they pried open with a crowbar. During the removal of the stone from beneath the chair, the 152-kilogram block broke into 2 pieces. This was an unforeseen mechanical failure. The smaller piece was carried to a waiting car driven by Matheson, while the larger piece was temporarily buried in a field in Kent to avoid police roadblocks, which had been set up around London once the theft was discovered the next morning. The students eventually retrieved the larger piece, transported it to Scotland in the trunk of a car, and had it repaired by a stonemason in Glasgow named Robert Gray. Gray inserted a brass rod to rejoin the 2 sections. For 3 months, the stone was hidden in various locations, including a cellar and the trunk of a car. The police investigation, led by Inspector Leonard Buggy, focused heavily on Scottish nationalist groups. Realizing that the stone could not be kept indefinitely without risking its discovery and their arrest, the students left the stone on the altar of Arbroath Abbey on April 11, 1951, a site of significant historical importance to Scottish independence. The police were tipped off, and the stone was returned to Westminster in time for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. No charges were pressed against the students to avoid creating political martyrs. The killing spree of Charles Starkweather and Caroline Fugate spans a period of 2 months, from December 1957 to January 1958, resulting in 11 deaths across Nebraska and Wyoming. Starkweather, a 19-year-old high school dropout, and Fugate, his 14-year-old girlfriend, engaged in a sequence of crimes that escalated from robbery to mass murder. The initial homicide occurred on December 1, 1957, when Starkweather robbed a service station and killed the attendant, Robert Colvert. The spree proper began on January 21, 1958, when Starkweather murdered Fugate's mother, stepfather, and 2-year-old half-sister at their home in Lincoln, Nebraska. The bodies were hidden in outbuildings on the property, and the couple remained in the house for 6 days, turning away visitors with a note on the door claiming illness. Upon fleeing the residence, the pair embarked on a chaotic trajectory, killing 7 more people over a span of a few days. Victims included August Meyer, a family friend, Robert Jensen and Carol King, 2 teenagers who offered them a ride, and C. Lauer Ward, a wealthy industrialist, along with his wife and maid. The logistics of their movement involved stealing vehicles from their victims to stay ahead of law enforcement. The National Guard was mobilized by the governor of Nebraska to assist in the manhunt, marking one of the first times such resources were used for a criminal pursuit of this nature. The spree ended on January 29, 1958, near Douglas, Wyoming. Starkweather killed a traveling shoe salesman, Merle Collison, to take his 1957 Bic. A passing motorist, Joe Sprinkle, stopped to help, assuming it was a breakdown. Starkweather threatened Sprinkle, but a struggle ensued. A rigorously timed intervention by a Wyoming deputy sheriff, who arrived moments later, forced Starkweather to flee in the vehicle. A high-speed pursuit followed, reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour. The chase concluded when a bullet shattered the windshield of the Bic, injuring Starkweather with flying glass. He surrendered immediately, believing he was bleeding to death. Fugate surrendered separately, claiming she was a hostage, a defense that was rejected by the jury. Starkweather was executed by electric chair in 1959. Fugate was paroled in 1976. The murders of the Clutter family in Holcomb, Kansas, on November 15, 1959, serve as a pivotal case study in forensic investigation and the psychology of rural crime. The victims, Herbert Clutter, his wife Bonnie, and their teenage children Nancy and Kenyon, were bound and shot at close range with a 12-gauge shotgun in their farmhouse. The perpetrators were Richard Hickok and Perry Smith, 2 parolees who had met at the Kansas State Penitentiary. The crime was motivated by information Hickok had received from a former cellmate, Floyd Wells, who had worked as a farmhand for Herbert Clutter. Wells falsely claimed that Clutter kept a safe containing $10,000 in cash in his home office. The logistical execution of the crime was flawed from the outset. Upon entering the home shortly after midnight, Hickok and Smith discovered there was no safe. Herbert Clutter transacted almost entirely by check. The total monetary gain from the robbery was approximately $40 to $50, a portable radio, and a pair of binoculars. Despite the lack of financial return, the pair proceeded to eliminate the witnesses. The investigation, led by Alvin Dewey of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, KBI, initially had no leads. The breakthrough was purely informational. Floyd Wells, hearing of the murders in prison, contacted the warden to implicate Hickok. Forensic evidence at the scene was limited but critical. A bloody boot print was found on the mattress box cover where Herbert Clutter was killed. The print had a distinctive diamond pattern on the sole. When Hickok and Smith were eventually apprehended in Las Vegas on December 30th, 1959, for driving a stolen car and passing bad checks, their boots were seized. The soles of Smith's boots matched the bloody print found at the scene perfectly. Furthermore, the radio and binoculars were recovered in their possession. During interrogation, the two men turned on each other, providing conflicting accounts of who pulled the trigger, but both confessed to being present and participating in the felony murder. They were hanged at the Kansas State Penitentiary in Lansing on April 14, 1965. The escape from Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary on June 11, 1962, involved three inmates, Frank Morris and brothers John and Clarence Anglin. A fourth conspirator, Alan West, failed to exit his cell in time and was left behind. The escape is noted for its engineering complexity and the use of improvised materials within a maximum security environment. The planning phase lasted approximately 6 months. The inmates discovered that the concrete surrounding the ventilation grills at the back of their cells had degraded due to moisture and salt air. They fabricated drilling tools from spoon handles stolen from the mess hall and a motor vacuumed from a broken vacuum cleaner to widen the ventilation ducts. To conceal their work from the guards during routine patrols, the inmates created papier-mâché dummy heads using a mixture of soap, toilet paper, and real hair collected from the prison barbershop. These heads were placed in their bunks on the night of the escape to simulate sleeping bodies. The group exited their cells through the widened vents, accessed the utility corridor behind the cell block, and climbed a network of pipes to the prison roof. They then descended a 50-foot bakery smokestack to reach the ground level. The critical logistical component was the crossing of the San Francisco Bay. The inmates had constructed a 6 by 14-foot inflatable raft and life vests using more than 50 stolen rubber raincoats, which they stitched together and sealed with heat from steam pipes. They launched the raft from the northeast shore of the island at approximately 10 p.m. The FBI investigation concluded that the men likely drowned due to the cold water temperature, approximately 50 to 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and the strong currents. However, no bodies were ever recovered. In the weeks following, a packet of letters belonging to the Anglins and pieces of rubber paddle-like wood were found floating or washed up on Angel Island. The case remains open with the U.S. Marshals Service, maintaining the theoretical possibility that the men survived and relocated, potentially to South America. The Great Train Robbery occurred on August 8, 1963, at the Bredego Railway Bridge in Buckinghamshire, England. A gang of 15 men, led by Bruce Reynolds, intercepted the Glasgow to London Royal Mail train. The target was the High Value Package (HVP) coach, which was transporting a large volume of banknotes following a bank holiday in Scotland. The total haul was £2.6 million, equivalent to over £50 million today. The mechanics of the stoppage involved tampering with the trackside signals. The gang covered the green all-clear light with a glove and connected a 6-volt battery to the red stoplight, forcing the train to halt at a precise location where the track was isolated. Upon stopping the train, the gang overpowered the driver, Jack Mills, striking him with an iron bar, an injury that caused him permanent brain damage. They uncoupled the HVP coach from the rest of the train and forced Mills to move the locomotive and the single carriage to the bridge, where trucks were waiting. The transfer of the 120 mail bags took less than 30 minutes. The gang then drove to a hideout, Leatherslade Farm, roughly 27 miles away. The plan relied on staying at the farm until the police search radius, anticipated to be 30 miles, had been relaxed. However, the police found the farm sooner than expected due to a tip-off from a neighbor who noticed the unusual vehicle activity. While the gang had fled before the police arrived, they left behind a substantial amount of forensic evidence. The intent had been to burn the farmhouse to destroy evidence, but the member assigned to this task failed to do so. Investigators recovered fingerprints on a ketchup bottle and a Monopoly board used by the robbers to pass the time. These prints were matched to existing criminal records, leading to the rapid identification and arrest of most of the gang members. The trial in 1964 resulted in sentences totaling 307 years. Notably, two members, Ronnie Biggs and Charlie Wilson, later escaped from prison, extending the operational timeline of the event into decades of international manhunts. The kidnapping of Frank Sinatra Jr. on December 8, 1963, from Harrah's Lake Tahoe, was a crime motivated by the desire to orchestrate a high-profile ransom extraction. The perpetrators were Barry Keenan, Joe Amsler, and John Irwin. Keenan, a 23-year-old with a history of substance abuse and financial trouble, conceived the plan under the delusion that he could invest the ransom money, pay it back later, and frame the kidnapping as a publicity stunt. The abduction occurred in room 417 of the lodge where Sinatra Jr., 19 at the time, was staying before a performance. The kidnappers entered under the guise of delivering a package, bound the victim with adhesive tape, and blindfolded him. They transported Sinatra Jr. to a safe house in Canoga Park, Los Angeles. The logistical negotiations were handled by John Irwin, who called Frank Sinatra Sr. to demand a ransom of $240,000. Sinatra Sr. offered $1 million, but the kidnappers, adhering rigidly to their initial plan, refused the higher amount. The drop was executed on December 11th at a Texaco gas station in Sepulveda. The FBI, coordinating closely with Sinatra Sr., recorded the serial numbers of the bills. Jerome Patrolman, an FBI agent, dropped the money between two school buses as instructed. While Sinatra Jr. was released unharmed in Bel Air on December 11th, the unraveling of the plot was swift. John Irwin, fearing the scale of the FBI involvement, confessed to his brother, who then contacted the authorities. The capture of the other two suspects followed immediately. A significant portion of the ransom money was recovered from the house in Canoga Park. The defense strategy during the trial attempted to argue that the kidnapping was a hoax arranged by the Sinatra family for publicity, a claim that gained traction in the press but was ultimately rejected by the jury. All three men were convicted, though they served relatively short sentences due to later parole decisions. The theft of the Star of India and other gems from the American Museum of Natural History in New York City on October 29, 1964, highlighted the severe inadequacy of museum security during that era. The heist was carried out by Jack Murphy, known as Meth the Surf, Alan Kuhn, and Roger Clark. The group, young surfers from Miami, noticed during a visit that the museum security was virtually non-existent. The windows in the Hall of Gems were often left unlocked for ventilation, and the alarm system was non-functional. On the night of the theft, Murphy and Kuhn scaled a fence and climbed a fire escape to reach the fourth-floor window of the Morgan Memorial Hall of Gems, which they found unlocked as expected. Once inside, they used duct tape and a glass cutter to breach the display cases, though in some instances, they simply leaned over the barriers. They acquired the 563-carat Star of India Sapphire, the 100-carat DeLong Star Ruby, and the Midnight Star Sapphire, among other stones. The total value of the stolen items was estimated at $410,000, roughly $4 million adjusted for inflation. The getaway was compromised by the visibility of their lifestyle. The group had been staying at a high-end hotel, the Cambridge House, and spending lavishly. A hotel employee reported their suspicious behavior and the presence of potential burglary tools to the police. The NYPD arrested the men within 48 hours. The recovery of the gems involved a plea deal. In exchange for leniency, the thieves agreed to reveal the location of the loot. The Star of India was recovered from a locker at a bus station in Miami. The DeLong Star Ruby was recovered months later after complex ransom negotiation involving a third party. The ease with which the theft was accomplished led to a complete overhaul of security protocols in major New York cultural institutions. The theft of the Jules Rimet Trophy, the World Cup, on March 20, 1966, occurred just months before the tournament was scheduled to be hosted in England. The trophy was on display at a stamp exhibition at Methodist Central Hall in Westminster. The security arrangement involved 2 uniformed officers and 2 plainclothes detectives guarding the trophy during the day, but the display case was left unguarded at night, secured only by a padlock on the back of the cabinet. The theft took place between 11 a.m. and 12:10 p.m. on a Sunday, during a church service held in another part of the building. The thief bypassed the alarm system and unscrewed the lock to remove the trophy. A ransom demand was sent to Joe Mears, the chairman of the Football Association, FA, demanding £15,000 in small notes. The police set up a sting operation for the ransom exchange. A man named Edward Betchley, a petty criminal and used car dealer, was arrested at the drop site. Betchley claimed he was merely a middleman known as the Pole and did not steal the trophy himself. He refused to divulge the location of the item or the identity of the actual thief. The recovery of the trophy on March 27, 1966, was serendipitous rather than the result of police deduction. David Corbett, a resident of South London, was walking his dog, a mongrel named Pickles, when the dog began sniffing around a package wrapped in newspaper near a garden hedge in Beulah Hill. Corbett unwrapped the package to find the solid gold trophy. Pickles became an instant national celebrity, appearing on television and in films. While Betchley was convicted of demanding money with menaces, the actual thief was never definitively identified, though rumors persisted for decades regarding a specialized gang of shoplifters. The trophy was returned to the FA in time for England's victory in July. The 300 million yen robbery, executed on December 10, 1968, in Tokyo, Japan, remains the single largest cash robbery in Japanese history and stands as a prominent cold case due to the expiration of the statute of limitations in 1975. The target was a Nippon Trust Bank transport car carrying bonuses for employees of the Toshiba factory in Fuchu. The heist was notable for its reliance on deception rather than brute force. The perpetrator, disguised as a uniformed police officer on a white motorcycle, intercepted the vehicle approximately 200 meters from the prison walls of Fuchu prison. This location was chosen for its psychological impact and lack of civilian traffic. The mechanics of the theft involved a sophisticated ruse. The officer informed the 4 bank employees that their branch manager's house had been bombed and that dynamite had been planted on their transport vehicle. When the employees exited the car, the robber crawled underneath to inspect the chassis. He ignited a warning flare he had brought with him, creating smoke and a brilliant light. As the employees retreated to the prison wall for safety, believing the vehicle was about to explode, the robber entered the driver's seat and drove away. The vehicle was later found abandoned, but the cash, contained in 3 metal duralumin cases, had been transferred to a dark blue 1955 Toyota Corolla, which was also later found abandoned. The subsequent investigation by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department was massive in scale, involving 170,000 police officers and the questioning of 110,000 suspects over 7 years. The composite sketch of the suspect, based on witness descriptions, became ubiquitous in Japan, though it was later revealed to be based on a generic reference image rather than a specific individual. Despite the recovery of 120 pieces of evidence at the scene, including the police motorcycle, which was a painted civilian Yamaha, a magnet used to attach false police insignia, and the flare casing, no conclusive forensic link was ever established. The statute of limitations for civil liability expired in 1988, meaning the perpetrator, if alive, could theoretically confess without legal repercussion, yet the identity remains unknown. The Zodiac Killer case involves a series of 5 confirmed murders and 2 injuries committed in Northern California between December 1968 and October 1969. The perpetrator is defined not just by the violence, but by his communication with the press and law enforcement, primarily through letters sent to the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. The first confirmed attack occurred on December 20, 1968, on Lake Herman Road in Benicia, resulting in the deaths of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen. The forensic profile of the killer established him as a male, likely heavyset, wearing military-style boots and, in at least one instance, the Lake Berryessa attack, a black executioner's hood with a white cross-circle symbol. The cryptographic aspect of the case began on July 31, 1969, when 3 letters were received containing 1/3 of a 408-symbol cipher. The killer demanded they be printed on the front page, threatening further violence if non-compliant. The 408 cipher was solved within a week by Donald and Betty Harden, revealing a message about the killer's motivation: "I like killing people because it is so much fun." However, subsequent ciphers, particularly the 340-character cipher sent in November 1969, remained unsolved for 51 years until a team of international cryptographers cracked it in 2020. The message did not contain identification information, merely mocking the police and denying he was the person who called a TV show earlier that week. The investigation was severely hampered by the lack of centralized police databases and the jurisdictional fragmentation between the SFPD, Vallejo Police, and Napa County Sheriff's Department. The only time the killer was likely seen by police was minutes after the murder of taxi driver Paul Stein in Presidio Heights on October 11, 1969. Officers responding to the scene passed a white male matching the description, but did not stop him because the dispatch had erroneously identified the suspect as a black male. A bloody fingerprint found on Stein's cab remains the primary physical evidence, yet it has never matched any suspect, including the primary person of interest, Arthur Lee Allen. The hijacking of Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 on November 24, 1971, by a man using the alias Dan Cooper, erroneously reported as D.B. Cooper, represents the only unsolved air piracy case in commercial aviation history. Cooper purchased a one-way ticket from Portland, Oregon, to Seattle, Washington. Shortly after takeoff at 2:50 p.m., he handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. He opened the case to display red cylinders, a battery, and wires, confirming the threat. His demands were specific: $200,000 in negotiable American currency, for parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserve, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. The exchange of passengers for the ransom and parachutes took place at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport at 5:39 p.m. Cooper retained the flight crew and ordered the plane to take off toward Mexico City, specifying an altitude of under 10,000 feet and a speed of less than 200 knots. He also demanded that the landing gear remain deployed and the cabin remain unpressurized. Crucially, he requested the aft air stair be lowered. At approximately 8 p.m., somewhere over the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, likely near Ariel, Washington, Cooper jumped from the rear stairs into a thunderstorm. The temperature was roughly 19 degrees Fahrenheit -7 degrees Celsius at that altitude, with heavy rain. The subsequent investigation, codenamed Norjack, Northwest Hijacking, spanned 45 years. The FBI interviewed over 800 suspects. The primary physical evidence recovered was a tie with a pearl tie clip left on the seat, from which partial DNA was later extracted, though of limited utility due to contamination. In 1980, a young boy named Brian Ingram discovered 3 bundles of the ransom cash, $5,800, rotting on the banks of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. The serial numbers matched the bills given to Cooper. This finding suggested Cooper may not have survived the jump, as the money was found upstream from the projected drop zone, implying it had washed down over time. The FBI officially suspended the active investigation in 2016. The Baker Street robbery, discovered on September 13, 1971, in London, targeted the vault of Lloyd's Bank. The heist was orchestrated by a gang that rented a leather goods shop named Le Sac 2 doors down from the bank. The operation involved tunneling 40 feet, 12 meters, through the earth and concrete to reach the vault floor. The tunneling process took 3 weeks and required the removal of 8 tons of spoil. To mask the noise of the excavation, the gang only dug during weekends or when traffic on Baker Street was heavy. They utilized a thermal lance to cut through the reinforced concrete floor of the vault, a technique that produces intense heat and requires significant oxygen supplies, indicating a high level of technical proficiency. The robbery is famous for the Robert Rowlands interception. Rowlands, an amateur radio operator living nearby, accidentally tuned into the walkie-talkie frequency the robbers were using to communicate with their lookout on a nearby rooftop. At approximately 11 p.m. on September 11th, Rowlands heard conversations about cutting tools and money. He contacted the police, who initially dismissed the call as a prank. When they finally investigated, they instructed radio cars to drive around with their sirens on while Rowlands listened to the frequency, hoping the robbers would mention the noise. However, the robbers were already inside the vault and did not hear the sirens. The police checked 750 banks within a 10-mile radius but failed to identify the target until the gang had already fled. The gang escaped with approximately £1.5 million in cash and valuables, roughly £36 million today. They left a message spray-painted on the inside of the vault wall: "Let Sherlock Holmes try to solve this." The recovery of the stolen goods was minimal. 4 men were eventually convicted in 1973, including Anthony Gavin and Thomas Stevens, largely due to leased documents for the leather shop and connections to known criminal associates. Rumors persisted for decades that the government issued a D-notice to suppress coverage of the robbery because the vault contained compromising photographs of Princess Margaret or other high-ranking officials, though declassified files in 2023 show no evidence of such a specific suppression order, attributing the silence to standard operational security. The United California bank burglary in Laguna Niguel, California, occurring over the weekend of March 24 to 26, 1972, was executed by a specialized crew from Youngstown, Ohio, led by Emil Dincio. The gang, which included Dincio's brother James, his nephew Harry Barber, and others, targeted the bank based on a rumor that President Richard Nixon kept a secret slush fund of $30 million in the vault. The timing was synchronized with a visit by Nixon to his nearby Western White House in San Clemente, ensuring that local police resources would be diverted to presidential security. The mechanics of the entry were explosive. The gang accessed the roof of the bank and used liquid nitroglycerine and dynamite to blast a hole directly through the reinforced concrete ceiling of the vault. To bypass the sound detection alarms, they filled the vault with expanding foam to muffle the blast, a technique Dincio had perfected in previous burglaries. Once inside, they spent the entire weekend looting the safety deposit boxes. The haul was estimated at $9 million in 1972 value, comprising cash, jewelry, and bearer bonds. No Nixon slush fund was found, but the legitimate assets stolen were substantial enough to make it one of the largest bank burglaries in U.S. history at the time. The investigation unraveled due to a logistical error involving transportation. The gang had flown to California using their real names, a decision that proved fatal when police found the getaway vehicle, a taxi service they had arranged. The FBI traced the taxi records to the group's flight manifests. Furthermore, the similar method of operation, to a burglary in Ohio pointed investigators toward the Dincio crew. Police recovered fingerprints from the inside of a dishwasher in the townhouse the gang had rented as a safe house. Emile Dincio was arrested and eventually sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Most of the loot was never recovered. The Hotel Pierre heist, which took place in New York City on January 2, 1972, holds the Guinness World Record for the most successful hotel robbery. The operation was masterminded by Samuel Nailo and Robert Comfort, professional thieves with ties to the Lucchese crime family. The target was the safety deposit boxes in the hotel strongroom, used by some of the wealthiest residents of Manhattan. The team consisted of 8 men, who arrived at the hotel at 3:50 a.m. in a Cadillac limousine. They wore tuxedos and false beards to blend in with the high society clientele returning from New Year's festivities. The mechanics of the takeover were swift. The robbers subdued the security guards and the night manager, handcuffing them and 19 guests' staff members in the lobby. They then forced the night auditor to open the strongroom. Over the course of 2.5 hours, the team systematically rifled through the boxes. The precise value of the stolen goods is difficult to ascertain because many of the items were undeclared or illicit, but estimates range from $4 million to $28 million, unadjusted. Among the victims was the actress Sophia Loren, whose jewelry was taken. The robbers were professional enough to tip the hotel staff $20 each before leaving. The aftermath of the heist was bloody, illustrating the volatility of organized crime partnerships. The investigation led to the arrest of Nailo and Comfort, largely due to an informant within their circle. However, the distribution of the loot caused internal friction. Nailo was assassinated in 1988 by a rival faction. Comfort was killed by mafia associates shortly after his release from prison. Most of the stolen jewelry was fenced immediately and stripped of its settings, making recovery impossible. The only surviving member of the crew, Nick the Cat Sacco, served time and later wrote a book detailing the logistical precision of the entry and the chaotic distribution of the proceeds. The kidnapping of Patricia Hearst, the 19-year-old heiress to the Hearst publishing fortune, on February 4, 1974, serves as a defining case for the psychological phenomenon of Stockholm Syndrome and the radicalization of the 1970s. The Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA, a small left-wing militant group led by Donald DeFreeze, Field Marshal Sank, abducted Hearst from her apartment in Berkeley, California. The initial phase of the crime was a political kidnapping. The SLA demanded that the Hearst family distribute $70 worth of food to every needy person in California, a logistical impossibility estimated to cost $400 million. The family eventually distributed $2 million worth of food in the Bay Area, an event that descended into chaotic rioting. The nature of the crime shifted on April 3, 1974, when the SLA released an audio tape in which Hearst announced she had joined the group and taken the name Tanya. On April 15, surveillance cameras at the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco captured Hearst wielding an M1 carbine during a robbery, shouting commands to the customers. This visual evidence shifted her status from victim to fugitive. The FBI investigation, one of the most intensive in history, tracked the group to a safe house in Los Angeles. A massive shootout ensued on May 17, resulting in the deaths of 6 SLA members, including DeFreeze. Hearst was not present during the siege. She was eventually captured in San Francisco on September 18, 1975, along with other SLA members. Her trial focused on whether her actions were the result of coercion and brainwashing, the defense's coercive persuasion theory, or voluntary participation. Despite expert testimony regarding the trauma of her confinement, which included isolation, sexual abuse, and sleep deprivation, the jury convicted her of bank robbery. She was sentenced to 35 years, later commuted to 7. President Jimmy Carter commuted her sentence in 1979, and she was fully pardoned by President Bill Clinton in 2001, closing the legal chapter on a case that blurred the lines between captive and combatant. The Société Générale heist in Nice, France, discovered on July 19, 1976, is often referred to as the heist of the century due to its audacity and the lack of violence. The mastermind was Albert Spaghetti, a French photographer and former soldier. The target was the bank's massive vault, believed to be impregnable. Spaghetti discovered that the vault's wall was adjacent to the city's sewer system. He recruited a team of professional gangsters from Marseille and local excavation experts. The tunneling operation took 2 months. The team had to drill through 3 meters of earth and 2 meters of reinforced concrete, all while navigating the active sewer lines. To maintain operational secrecy and morale, the team installed electricity and ventilation in the tunnel. They worked at night to avoid detection by the bank's seismic sensors. On the weekend of Bastille Day, July 16th, the team finally breached the vault. They spent the entire long weekend inside, welding the vault door shut from the inside to prevent bank staff from entering on Monday morning. They opened 371 safety deposit boxes, stealing approximately 46 million francs, equivalent to about $30 million today, in cash, gold, and jewelry. Before leaving, Spaghetti wrote a message on the wall: "Sans armes, ni haine, ni violence," without weapons, nor hatred, nor violence. The investigation identified Spaghetti through a tip-off from a former girlfriend. He was arrested in October 1976. During a hearing at the Palace of Justice in March 1977, Spaghetti executed a pre-planned escape. He distracted the judge with a fake document, jumped out of a second-story window, landed on a parked car, and fled on a waiting motorcycle. He remained a fugitive for the rest of his life, reportedly living in Argentina and undergoing plastic surgery. He died of throat cancer in 1989. His body was anonymously left in front of his mother's house in France, allowing for a legal burial. The Lufthansa heist took place on December 11, 1978, at John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City. The robbery targeted the cargo terminal of Lufthansa Airlines, which was a primary transit point for cash and currency being returned to the United States from West Germany. The heist was planned by Jimmy Burke, a powerful associate of the Lutschis crime family. The critical intelligence came from an inside man, Louis Werner, a Lufthansa cargo agent with gambling debts who provided the layout, alarm codes, and the schedule of the shipments. At 3 a.m., a group of 6 gunmen in a Ford Econoline van backed into the cargo ramp. They wore ski masks and carried fraudulent identification. The mechanics of the heist relied on neutralizing the employees swiftly. The night shift workers were rounded up in the lunchroom. The robbers forced the shift manager to deactivate the silent alarm. They loaded 72 cartons of untraceable cash and jewels into the van. The total haul was $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, roughly $23 million total today. The entire operation took 64 minutes. The aftermath of the heist is infamous for the high body count rather than the recovery of the money. Paranoid that the participants would inform on him, Jimmy Burke ordered the murder of almost everyone involved in the robbery. The getaway driver, Parnell Stacks Edwards, was the first to be killed after he failed to crush the van, leaving it for the FBI to find with fingerprints. Over the next few years, nearly a dozen associates were murdered. The only major conviction related to the heist itself was that of Louis Werner. The money was never recovered. The events were later chronicled by Henry Hill, an associate of Burke who turned state's evidence, forming the basis for the film Goodfellas. The Chicago Tylenol poisonings, which began on September 29, 1982, were a series of random poisoning deaths resulting from drug tampering. 7 people in the Chicago metropolitan area collapsed and died after ingesting extra-strength Tylenol capsules that had been laced with potassium cyanide. The first victim was 12-year-old Mary Kellerman. Later that day, Adam Janus died. His brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa also died after taking pills from the same bottle while gathering to mourn Adam. The correlation was identified by 2 firefighters, Philip Capitelli and Richard Keyworth, who monitored the radio dispatches and noted the mention of Tylenol in both locations. The mechanics of the crime involved shelf tampering. The perpetrator purchased or stole bottles of Tylenol from various retail outlets, Jewel, Osco Drug, Walgreens, removed the capsules, filled them with cyanide, and returned the bottles to the store shelves. The dosage found in the capsules was 10,000 times the lethal amount. Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer, responded by issuing a nationwide recall of 31 million bottles, costing the company over $100 million. This decisive action is widely cited as a model for corporate crisis management. The investigation by the FBI and Illinois State Police generated over 100,000 pages of reports but no murder charges. A primary suspect was James Lewis, who sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the killings. However, forensic analysis showed he was in New York at the time and had no physical link to the Chicago bottles. He was convicted of extortion but not the murders. Another suspect, Roger Arnold, was investigated but never charged. The most lasting legacy of the crime was the immediate legislative and industrial change. In 1983, the U.S. Congress passed the Tylenol bill, making product tampering a federal crime, and the FDA mandated the tamper-resistant foil seals and safety packaging that are now standard globally. The Brinks-Mat robbery, occurring on November 26, 1983, at the Heathrow International Trading Estate in London, is notable not for its tactical sophistication but for the accidental scale of its success. The original target was a shipment of £3 million in cash. However, upon breaching the vault, the 6 robbers discovered 6,800 bars of gold bullion, weighing 3 tons, which were waiting to be transported to the Far East. The gang, led by Brian Robinson and Mickey McAvoy, had gained entry with the help of an inside man, Anthony Black, a security guard at the depot who was Robinson's brother-in-law. At 6:40 a.m., the gang entered Warehouse Unit 7. They poured petrol over the staff and threatened to light it unless the vault combination was revealed. Once inside, the realization of the gold's weight required a frantic change in logistics. The gang had to summon a stronger vehicle to transport the load. They utilized a reinforced Ford Transit van. The total haul was valued at £26 million, approximately £100 million today. The sheer volume of the gold created a massive money laundering problem. The task of smelting the gold and reintroducing it into the legitimate market was outsourced to Kenneth Noy, a professional criminal who mixed the gold with copper to disguise its origin. The investigation, led by Commander Frank Cater of the Flying Squad, quickly identified Black through his familial connection to Robinson. Black confessed, leading to the arrests of Robinson and McAvoy within weeks. However, the majority of the gold, and the other 4 robbers, remained elusive. Noy was eventually caught after he killed an undercover police officer, John Fordham, whom he found in his garden. Noy was acquitted of murder on grounds of self-defense but later convicted for handling the stolen gold. The curse of Brinks-Mat refers to the high number of violent deaths among those involved in laundering the proceeds, including the unsolved murder of John Goldfinger Palmer in 2015. It is estimated that a significant portion of the gold re-entered the global market, with claims that anyone buying gold jewelry in the UK after 1983 is likely wearing a fraction of Brinks-Mat. The kidnapping of Sheargar, the most famous racehorse in the world, took place on the evening of February 8, 1983, at the Ballymenny Stud near the Curragh in County Kildare, Ireland. Shiagar was a bay stallion owned by the Aga Khan IV and had been syndicated for £10 million, a record valuation at the time. The operation was attributed to the Provisional Irish Republican Army, IRA, specifically to a unit seeking to raise funds for arms procurement, though the organization has never officially claimed responsibility. The kidnapping team, consisting of at least 6 armed men wearing balaclavas, arrived at the stud farm at approximately 8:30 p.m. They held the head groom, James Fitzgerald, and his family at gunpoint. Fitzgerald was forced to load Shiagar into a horse box towed by a stolen car. The kidnappers then drove Fitzgerald around for 3 hours before releasing him, giving them a significant head start before the alarm could be raised. The investigation by the Garda Síochána was hampered by a series of coded calls and misleading negotiations. The kidnappers demanded £2 million in ransom. However, the syndicate of 35 owners, led by the Aga Khan, refused to pay, arguing that doing so would make every high-value thoroughbred in the world a target. Negotiations broke down rapidly. The kidnappers provided a photograph of Shiagar's head next to a current newspaper as proof of life on February 11th. However, subsequent calls indicated the horse had been injured or become unmanageable. The prevailing theory, supported by informers, is that Shiagar damaged his leg in the horse box and was killed within days of the abduction to prevent the logistical burden of veterinary care. His remains have never been found, despite extensive searches of bogs and forests in the border region. The lack of a body prevented the syndicate from claiming the insurance payout, which only covered death by accident or disease, not theft. The Great Bookie Robbery occurred on April 21, 1984, in Melbourne, Australia, and is often cited as the most professionally executed heist in the country's history. The target was the settling of accounts for the Victorian Club, a private club for bookmakers. The robbery took place at the club's temporary premises on Queen Street. The gang, led by Raymond Ray Bennett, had impeccable intelligence regarding the schedule of cash transfers. The heist was timed to coincide with the busy Easter racing carnival, ensuring the safe would be full. The operation relied on disguise and speed. The robbers, dressed in grey dust coats and trilby hats and wearing plastic masks, entered the building wielding submachine guns. They timed their entry for when the armored car guards were transferring the cash boxes. The entire robbery took less than 6 minutes. They loaded 11 steel boxes containing roughly $1.6 million Australian dollars, unadjusted, into a waiting van. The van was later found abandoned, having been wiped clean of fingerprints. The sheer volume of cash was substantial, comprising untraceable notes from racetrack betting. The investigation by the Victoria Police was frustrated by the code of silence among the criminal underworld. While police had strong suspicions about the identities of the perpetrators, naming Bennett, Ian Coleman, and others, there was insufficient forensic evidence to lay charges. The stolen money was never recovered. The aftermath was characterized by a violent internal feud. Over the next decade, many of the prime suspects were murdered in gangland hits, including Ray Bennett, who was shot dead in a courthouse corridor in 1979, prior to this specific robbery, though his crew was involved, and other associates in the years following the heist. This cycle of violence effectively closed the case as the suspects eliminated one another. The Knightsbridge security deposit robbery on July 12, 1987, in London, stands as one of the largest cash robberies in history, with a haul valued at approximately £60 million, roughly £150 million today. The mastermind was Vallejo Vice, an Italian lawyer and son of a lawyer, who had arrived in London in 1986 wanted for over 50 armed robberies in Italy. The target was the Knightsbridge Safe Deposit Centre, located in a highly secure building opposite Harrods. The methodology was a classic Trojan horse entry. 2 men, posing as customers wishing to rent a safety deposit box, entered the facility. Once inside the vault area, they subdued the manager and the security guards at gunpoint. They then hung a sign on the front door stating the center was temporarily closed, allowing them to let in their accomplices without arousing suspicion from the street. For roughly 2 hours, the gang systematically broke open the boxes, prioritizing those known to hold high-value items like diamonds, cocaine, and cash. The investigation broke open due to a single, critical error. One of the robbers cut his finger while prying open a box, leaving a smear of blood on the vault floor. Forensic analysis matched the blood to Vicey's known associates. The police placed the gang under surveillance. Vicey had fled to Latin America but made the fatal mistake of returning to London to retrieve his Ferrari Testarossa, which he had left behind. Police arrested him at a roadblock as he drove the car. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. During his incarceration, he acted as a chess opponent for the governor. He was deported to Italy in 1992 to serve the remainder of his sentence, where he was killed during a day release in 2000 during a gunfight with police. The theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston on March 18, 1990, remains the largest property crime in U.S. history and the most significant art heist in the world, with the stolen works valued at $500 million. The perpetrators were two men disguised as Boston police officers. At 1:24 a.m., they buzzed the museum's side entrance, claiming to be responding to a disturbance call. The security guard on duty, Rick Barth, broke protocol and buzzed them in. The officers immediately handcuffed Barth and a second guard, wrapping their heads in duct tape and securing them to pipes in the basement. For 81 minutes, the thieves moved through the galleries with little urgency. Motion detectors recorded their path. They cut canvases from their frames using knives, a crude method that likely caused significant damage to the artworks. The stolen items included Vermeer's The Concert, one of only 34 known works by the artist, Rembrandt's The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, his only seascape, and a manet, along with sketches by Degas and a bronze eagle finial from a Napoleonic flag. They bypassed more valuable works, such as Renaissance paintings by Raphael and Botticelli, suggesting a lack of specialized art knowledge or specific shopping list. The investigation by the FBI has pursued leads involving the Irish Republican Army and Boston organized crime figures, particularly the Molino gang. Despite a $10 million reward and immunity offers, not a single item has been recovered. In 2013, the FBI announced they knew the identities of the thieves, suspected to be George Riesfelder and Lenny D'Imusio, both deceased, but the location of the art remains a mystery. The empty frames hang in the museum to this day, as the Gardners will strictly forbids moving or changing the collection's arrangement. The theft of Edvard Munch's The Scream from the National Gallery in Oslo on February 12, 1994, coincided with the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Lillehammer. The focus of the nation and its police force was entirely on the Games, leaving the museum with minimal security. The thieves, led by Paul Enger, a former professional footballer turned criminal, executed the robbery in under 50 seconds. They placed a ladder against the museum wall, climbed to a first-floor window, smashed the glass, cut the wire holding the painting, and climbed back down. The alarm was triggered immediately, but the security guard on duty was temporarily away from his monitors. By the time police arrived, the thieves were gone. They left a postcard at the scene with the message, "Thanks for the poor security." The ransom demand was set at $1 million. The Norwegian government refused to pay, and the gallery turned to Scotland Yard's Art and Antique Squad for assistance. The recovery operation was a sting organized by British detectives posing as art buyers from the Getty Museum. They offered to purchase the painting for £250,000. Paul Enger and his accomplices took the bait. The exchange was set up at a hotel in Skardstrand, Munch's summer residence. The painting was recovered undamaged on May 7, 1994, 3 months after the theft. Enger was convicted and sentenced to 6 years in prison. He later claimed in interviews that he had hidden the painting between the boards of his dining room table and that his family had unknowingly eaten meals over it for weeks. The collapse of Barings Bank, the oldest merchant bank in London, founded in 1762, occurred on February 26, 1995, due to the unauthorized trading activities of a single derivatives broker, Nick Leeson. Leeson was the general manager of the bank's Singapore office, tasked with arbitrage trading on the Singapore International Monetary Exchange, SIMEX. His job was to exploit small price differences between the Nikkei 225 futures contracts listed on the Osaka Securities Exchange in Japan and SIMEX. This was supposed to be a low-risk strategy. However, Leeson began engaging in unauthorized speculative trading, betting on the future direction of the Japanese markets. To hide his losses, he utilized an error account numbered 88888, which he excluded from the daily reports sent to London. By late 1994, the losses in this account exceeded £200 million. Leeson's strategy was to double down, selling straddles, betting the market would remain stable, to collect premiums to cover the losses. The catastrophic event was the Great Hanshin earthquake in Kobe on January 17, 1995. The Nikkei index plummeted, and Leeson's positions hemorrhaged value. In a desperate attempt to move the market back up, he bought massive quantities of Nikkei futures, eventually holding nearly half the market's open interest. The losses reached £827 million, $1.3 billion, twice the bank's available trading capital. Leeson fled Singapore on February 23, leaving a note saying, "I'm sorry." He was arrested in Frankfurt on March 2. Barings was declared insolvent and sold to the Dutch bank ING for the nominal sum of £1. Leeson was sentenced to 6.5 years in Changi prison. The Dunbar armored robbery, which took place on September 12, 1997, in Los Angeles, is the largest cash robbery in United States history, with a total take of $18.9 million. The heist was an inside job orchestrated by Alan Pace, a regional safety inspector for Dunbar. Pace used his position to photograph the interior of the depot, map the security camera blind spots, and obtain the key codes for the vault. He recruited 5 childhood friends to assist him. The timing was precise. The robbery occurred on a Friday night, when the vault contained the maximum amount of cash for weekend distribution. Pace used his own key to enter the facility through a side door at 12:30 a.m. The team waited in the cafeteria for the guards to take their lunch breaks. They ambushed the guards individually, binding them with duct tape. Pace knew exactly which bags contained non-sequential, non-traceable bills. They loaded the cash into a U-Haul truck and exited the facility, taking the security recording tapes with them. The investigation stalled for 2 years due to Pace's careful planning. He had instructed the team on how to avoid suspicion. Do not spend the money lavishly, do not quit your jobs, and do not buy new cars. The breakthrough came when one of the robbers, Eugene Hill, gave a stack of cash still in its original bank strap to a real estate broker for a down payment on a house. The broker, suspicious of the strap, contacted the police. Hill confessed and implicated the others. Approximately $10 million of the stolen money remains unaccounted for. Pace was sentenced to 24 years in federal prison. The North Hollywood shootout on February 28, 1997, fundamentally changed American police tactics and equipment. 2 bank robbers, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, entered the Bank of America branch on Laurel Canyon Boulevard at 9:17 a.m. They were heavily armored, wearing full-body aramid, Kevlar, vests with trauma plates, and armed with illegally modified fully automatic rifles, Type 56 assault rifles, HK-91S, and AR-15s, with high-capacity drum magazines. They fired over 1,100 rounds during the 44-minute engagement. As they exited the bank, they were met by lapped officers who were armed only with standard-issue 9mm Beretta pistols and .38 revolvers. The police rounds could not penetrate the robbers' body armor. The officers were forced to requisition AR-15s from a nearby gun store, B&B Sales, to return effective fire. The shootout was broadcast live by news helicopters, showing the robbers calmly firing at police and civilians while absorbing multiple hits. The conflict ended when Phillips' rifle jammed. Unable to clear it with one hand due to a thumb injury, he drew a pistol and committed suicide while being shot by police. Matasareanu attempted to hijack a truck but was engaged by SWAT officers. They shot underneath the truck, hitting his unprotected legs and feet 29 times. He bled to death at the scene before an ambulance was allowed to enter the hot zone. 11 police officers and 7 civilians were injured, but miraculously, only the 2 perpetrators died. The event led to the widespread issuing of patrol rifles, AR-15s, to regular police units across the U.S. The Millennium Dome raid on November 7, 2000, in London, was an attempted robbery of the De Beers Millennium Star Diamond, a flawless 203-carat gem valued at £200 million. The gang also targeted 11 blue diamonds nearby. The plan was conceived by a seasoned crew involving career criminals like William Cocott and Raymond Betson. Their strategy was cinematic. They planned to use a JCB earth mover to crash through the perimeter fence and the reinforced wall of the dome, enter the vault room, use a nail gun and sledgehammers to breach the display case, and escape via the River Thames on a high-speed boat. However, the flying squad of the Metropolitan Police was already monitoring the gang due to a tip-off about an armored van robbery that had been abandoned. Operation Magician was launched, involving 200 officers. The police replaced the real diamonds with crystal replicas days before the raid. They also placed undercover officers disguised as cleaners and tourists inside the dome. When the gang crashed through the wall at 9:30 a.m., throwing smoke grenades, they were allowed to reach the display case to ensure the charge of conspiracy to rob would stick. As the robbers began hammering the glass, which was specially reinforced and did not break as easily as tested, the police closed in. The boat driver was arrested on the river by the Special Boat Service, SBS. The robbers were caught inside the vault room, trapped by the delayed action gas shutters. No shots were fired. The visual of the robbers in gas masks and body armor being tackled by cleaners remains iconic. The gang members received sentences ranging from 15 to 18 years. The operation is considered one of the most successful preventive policing actions in UK history. The Antwerp Diamond Heist, occurring on the weekend of February 15 and 16, 2003, is frequently cited by criminologists as the most technically complex burglary of the 21st century. The target was the vault of the Antwerp Diamond Centre, located 2 floors below ground in the heart of the world's diamond district. The vault was protected by 10 layers of security, including infrared heat detectors, a Doppler radar, a magnetic field, a seismic sensor, and a lock with 100 million possible combinations. The mastermind, Leonardo Notarbartolo, a professional thief associated with a group known as the School of Turin, spent 2 years preparing for the operation. He rented an office in the building, posing as an Italian diamond merchant, to gain 24-hour access and map the security protocols. The team, consisting of specialists with aliases like the Monster, electrical expert, the Genius, alarm specialist, and the King of Keys, bypassed every system without triggering a single alarm. To neutralize the heat and motion sensors, they used simple hairspray to coat the lenses, temporarily blinding them. To bypass the magnetic field on the vault door, they taped a custom-made aluminium plate over the magnets, tricking the system into believing the door was still closed even when it was open. The team worked in the dark, memorizing the layout to avoid turning on lights that might alert external sensors. They emptied 123 of the 160 safety deposit boxes. The haul consisted of loose diamonds, gold, and jewelry valued at approximately $100 million. The crime was discovered on Monday morning when the security guards found the vault door open and the floor littered with empty velvet pouches and cash. The investigation unraveled due to a singular lapse in discipline, the disposal of garbage. Nota Bartolo had instructed Speedy, a team member, to burn the trash bag containing the evidence in France. However, Speedy panicked and dumped the bag in a wooded area alongside the E19 motorway. A local property owner found the bag, which contained half-eaten sandwiches, a receipt for a salami sandwich purchased near the Diamond Center, and videotapes from the surveillance system. DNA from the sandwich matched Nota Bartolo. He was arrested when he returned to the Diamond Center to check on his office. He was sentenced to 10 years. The diamonds have never been recovered. The Northern Bank robbery in Belfast, Northern Ireland, executed on December 20, 2004, remains the largest cash robbery in British history, with a total theft of £26.5 million. The operation is widely attributed to the Provisional Irish Republican Army, IRA, though the organization has consistently denied involvement. The heist was distinct for its reliance on tiger kidnapping, a tactic where family members are held hostage to force an employee to facilitate a crime. On the night of Sunday, December 19th, two groups of armed men, disguised as police officers, entered the homes of two bank officials, Chris Ward and Kevin Kmullen. The families of both men were taken hostage and held at undisclosed locations. The following day, Ward and Kmullen were ordered to report to work at the bank's headquarters on Donegal Square West as if nothing were wrong. At 12 p.m., per the robbers' instructions, Ward removed a sum of £1 million in cash and placed it in a sports bag, which he handed over to a contact in the street. This acted as a test run. Later that evening, after the bank closed, Ward and Kmullen remained inside. They allowed the gang entry to the main cash handling center. The robbers loaded crates of banknotes into a white van parked in the loading bay. The operation was timed to coincide with the pre-Christmas period when the bank held higher than average cash reserves. The police response involved the immediate recall and reissue of Northern Bank banknotes. On January 7, 2005, the bank announced it would withdraw all its £10, £20, £50, and £100 notes and replace them with new designs in different colors to render the stolen cash worthless. This logistical countermeasure forced the robbers to launder the money rapidly or move it internationally. The investigation has been politically sensitive and largely inconclusive. In 2005, police raided a money laundering club in Cork and found £2.3 million in sterling, but no direct forensic link to the robbery was established. The case remains open, with the consensus being that the money was used to fund pension pots for IRA members following the cessation of military operations. The burglary of the Banco Central in Fortaleza, Brazil, discovered on August 8, 2005, involved the theft of roughly 160 million reais, $71.6 million at 2005 exchange rates. The perpetrators used a method reminiscent of the Baker Street robbery, but on a grander industrial scale. 3 months prior to the heist, the gang rented a commercial property 2 blocks from the bank and set up a front company called Grama Sintética, ostensibly selling synthetic grass. They went so far as to create branded t-shirts and caps for the employees to wear, ensuring neighbors saw the moving soil and equipment without suspicion. From this location, they dug a tunnel 78 meters, 256 feet, long and 70 centimeters wide, roughly 4 meters below street level. The tunnel was an engineering marvel. It was lined with wood and plastic to prevent collapse, equipped with electric lighting and an air conditioning system to allow for long work shifts, and included a rail system to transport the spoil back to the shop. The excavation targeted the bank's vault floor, which was made of 1.1 meters of steel-reinforced concrete. The gang used diamond-tipped drills to breach the floor over the weekend. The stolen cash weighed approximately 3.5 metric tons, consisting entirely of used 50 real notes that were unregistered and non-sequential, making them untraceable. The crime was discovered on Monday morning. The investigation, led by the Brazilian Federal Police, Polícia Federal, resulted in the arrest of over 20 people connected to the crime, primarily through the tracking of large vehicle purchases in the days following the theft. However, the aftermath was characterized by extreme violence. Corrupt police officers and rival gangs kidnapped several of the robbers to extort their share of the loot. The alleged mastermind, Luis Fernando Ribeiro, was kidnapped and killed despite his family paying a ransom. To date, only about 20 million reais have been recovered. The Securitas Depot robbery in Tunbridge, Kent, on February 22, 2006, is the largest cash robbery in UK history, surpassing the Northern Bank heist. The stolen amount was £53,116,760. The perpetrators were a diverse group of career criminals, including Albanian nationals and local Kent figures. The operation began with a traffic stop abduction. The depot manager, Colin Dixon, was pulled over while driving home by what appeared to be an unmarked police car with blue lights in the grille. A man in a high-visibility jacket and police hat approached him. Dixon was handcuffed and transferred to a van. Simultaneously, 2 other men dressed as police officers visited Dixon's home, telling his wife and young son that Dixon had been involved in an accident. They were also abducted. The family was held at a farm in West Kent before being driven to the depot at 1 a.m. Dixon was coerced into opening the gates and neutralizing the alarm systems under threat of his family's execution. 14 members of the depot staff were bound, hooded, and locked in cash cages. The gang, armed with AK-47 assault rifles and wearing balaclavas, spent over an hour loading the cash into a 7.5-ton Renault Midlum truck. They left behind £153 million because it would not fit in the vehicle. The investigation, Operation Murray, was rapid and effective. The police tracked the vehicles using automatic number plate recognition, ANPR, cameras. A critical error was the use of a white Ford Transit van that had a distinct eye motif sticker on the back. This van was abandoned at a pub, containing balaclavas, body armor, and plans of the depot. DNA from the latex masks found in the van matched several suspects. Police raids recovered £21 million of the cash. The mastermind, Lee Murray, fled to Morocco. Because he held Moroccan citizenship, he could not be extradited to the UK. He was instead tried in Morocco for the robbery and sentenced to 10 years, later increased to 25 years on appeal. The Vastberger helicopter heist occurred on September 23, 2009, in Stockholm, Sweden. The target was the G4S cash service depot. This was the first robbery in Swedish history to utilize a helicopter. The aircraft, a Bell 206 Jet Ranger, had been stolen earlier that morning from Norrtälje. At 5:15 a.m., the helicopter landed on the roof of the depot. 3 or 4 men, armed with submachine guns and explosives, exited the aircraft. They used a sledgehammer to break through the reinforced glass skylight and dropped into the operations room. The police response was deliberately paralyzed by the gang's logistical preparations. Caltrops, spiked metal devices, had been scattered on the road surrounding the depot to puncture the tires of responding police vehicles. Furthermore, a decoy package marked bomb was placed on the helipad of the police station in Mitting, grounding the police's own helicopter fleet. This gave the robbers unchallenged air superiority. Inside the depot, the men used circular saws to breach the cash cages. They loaded bags of cash into the helicopter using a hoist. The entire operation took roughly 20 minutes. The haul was estimated at 39 million Swedish krona, $5.3 million. The helicopter was found abandoned in a forest north of Stockholm. The investigation led to the arrest of 7 men. A key piece of evidence was DNA found on the control stick of the stolen helicopter, which matched Alexander Eriksson, a 34-year-old pilot. It was later revealed that the Serbian paramilitary group the Pink Panthers may have provided logistical support or personnel. The pilots and ground crew were sentenced to terms ranging from 1 to 7 years. The money has never been recovered. The audacity of the crime led to new regulations in Sweden regarding the security of cash depots, including the installation of roof spikes to prevent landings. The Graf Diamonds robbery took place on August 6, 2009, at the Graf Diamonds flagship store on New Bond Street in London. The theft resulted in the loss of 43 items of jewelry, valued at nearly £40 million. The perpetrators were Aman Kasai and Craig Calderwood. The heist is notable for its use of professional theatrical prosthetics. The 2 men visited a makeup studio in Covent Garden prior to the robbery, paying £450 for latex masks that altered their skin tone and facial features, making them appear decades older. They arrived at the store by taxi, dressed in expensive suits. Once inside, they produced handguns and ordered the staff to the floor. They forced a female employee to open the display cases, filling a bag with diamond necklaces, earrings, and watches. As they exited, they took the employee hostage briefly, firing a warning shot into the street to deter bystanders. They fled in a series of vehicles, switching from a BMW to a Mercedes and then to a Ford Galaxy to confuse pursuers. The investigation, led by the flying squad, identified the suspects through a careless mistake. As Kasai transferred from the BMW to the Mercedes, he accidentally dropped a pay-as-you-go mobile phone wedged between the seats. Police recovered the phone and analyzed its call history. This linked the robbers to the getaway drivers and the makeup artist who had applied the disguises. The makeup artist identified the men from a lineup, noting that they had complained about the heat of the latex. While Kasai and Calderwood were convicted and sentenced to over 20 years each, none of the 43 pieces of jewelry had been recovered, leading investigators to believe they were dismantled and recut within hours of the theft. The Brussels Airport Diamond Heist on February 18, 2013, is one of the largest diamond heists in history, with a confirmed loss of $50 million. The target was a Helvetic Airways Fokker 100 aircraft on the tarmac at Zaventem Airport, preparing for a flight to Zurich. The diamonds were being transferred from an armored Brinks truck to the cargo hold. The operation was executed with military precision by 8 men dressed in dark police uniforms and balaclavas. At 7:47 p.m., 2 black vehicles, an Audi and a Mercedes van equipped with blue police lights, crashed through the airport's perimeter fence. They drove directly to the aircraft, surrounding the armored truck and the plane. The robbers exited the vehicles brandishing assault rifles with laser sights. They did not fire a shot. They ordered the ground crew and the pilot to back away. Using a specific loading manifest they had likely obtained from an insider, they targeted only the pallets containing rough and polished diamonds, ignoring other cargo. The transfer took less than 3 minutes. They then sped off through the same gap in the fence. The police found the burnt-out van shortly after. The investigation was multinational, involving Belgian, French, and Swiss authorities. In May 2013, a series of raids in France, Belgium, and Switzerland led to the arrest of 31 people. A significant portion of the diamonds was recovered in Switzerland. The primary suspect, Marc Bertoldi, a French career criminal, was arrested in Metz. He was acquitted of the actual robbery due to lack of direct evidence placing him on the tarmac, but was sentenced to 5 years for being a co-conspirator and for money laundering. The speed and specific knowledge of the cargo placement pointed strongly to an inside man within the airport or the transport company, though no employee was ever definitively linked. The Hatton Garden safe deposit burglary in London, carried out over the Easter weekend in April 2015, captured global attention due to the advanced age of the perpetrators, who were dubbed the Bad Grandpas by the press. The ringleader was 76-year-old Brian Reeder. The gang targeted the vault of the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Limited, an underground facility used by jewelers in the district. The entry method was analog and destructive. The gang entered the building through a communal lift shaft, descending to the basement. They used a heavy-duty Hilti DD350 diamond coring drill to bore 3 overlapping holes through the 50 cm thick reinforced concrete wall of the vault. The operation spanned 2 nights. On the first night, Thursday, the 10-ton hydraulic ram required to push the vault shelving unit out of the way broke. The gang left the scene and returned with new equipment on Saturday to finish the job. They ransacked 73 safety deposit boxes. The stolen loot was valued at approximately £14 million, consisting of gold, diamonds, sapphires, and cash. The investigation relied heavily on CCTV analysis and vehicle tracking. The gang made basic errors, such as using their own vehicles, a white Mercedes, to reconnoiter the area and driving the getaway van with the license plates visible. Audio recording probes placed in their vehicles by the flying squad after they were identified captured them boasting about the heist and discussing the disposal of the goods. These recordings were central to the prosecution. Reeder and his associates, Terry Perkins, 67, Daniel Jones, 60, and John Collins, 74, were all convicted. A younger man known only as Basil, who had the technical skill to disable the alarm and did not leave with the others, remained at large for 3 years before being identified as Michael Seed, 57, and arrested in 2018. The theft of the big maple leaf coin from the Bode Museum in Berlin on March 27, 2017, involved the removal of a solid gold coin issued by the Royal Canadian Mint. The coin is 53 centimeters in diameter, 3 centimeters thick, and weighs 100 kilograms, 220 pounds. Its material value at the time was €3.75 million, $4 million, though its face value is $1 million Canadian dollars. The purity is 99.999% gold. The perpetrators were members of the Remo clan, a notorious organized crime family in Berlin. The logistics of the theft were crude but effective. At 3:30 a.m., 3 men, Wissam Remo, Ahmed Remo, and Dennis W., placed a ladder against the museum wall adjacent to the S-Bahn train tracks. They broke through a window on the 2nd floor. Inside, they smashed the bulletproof glass case with a sledgehammer. The critical logistical challenge was the weight of the coin. They used a skateboard and a rope to maneuver the coin out of the window and across the tracks to a waiting wheelbarrow, which they used to transport it to a getaway car in a nearby park. The wheelbarrow collapsed under the weight during transport, leaving a distinct track in the gravel. Police investigators found gold shavings on the window frame and the train tracks. DNA evidence on the ladder and in the car linked the Remo cousins to the crime. A key factor was the assistance of an inside man, Dennis W., who worked as a security guard at the museum and provided information about the alarm systems and patrol schedules. In 2020, the Remo cousins were sentenced to 4.5 years in juvenile detention due to their age at the time of the crime. The coin has never been recovered. Prosecutors believe it was cut into small pieces and melted down immediately after the theft to be sold as gold bullion, destroying its numismatic value. The Green Vault, Grünes burglary in Dresden, Germany, on November 25, 2019, is considered the largest jewel theft in history in terms of cultural value, with estimates exceeding €1 billion. The target was the royal treasury of Augustus the Strong. The operation was again orchestrated by the Remo clan. The heist began at 4:55 a.m. with a targeted arson attack on an electrical distribution box near the museum. This disabled the streetlights, plunging the area into darkness, and cut power to the museum's external alarms. Two thieves cut through an iron grille on a ground floor window and broke the glass. Once inside the jewel room, they used a hydraulic rescue tool, often used by firefighters, to pry open the display cabinet containing 18th century jewelry sets. They moved with extreme speed, snatching 21 pieces, including the 49-carat Dresden white diamond and a diamond-encrusted sword. They sprayed the room with a dry powder fire extinguisher to obscure their tracks and destroy forensic evidence before fleeing in an Audi A6. The car was later found burnt out in an underground parking garage. The investigation was a massive undertaking by the Epaulette Special Commission. In November 2020, police raided 18 properties in Berlin involving 1,600 officers and arrested several members of the Remo family, including those involved in the Bode Museum theft. In a surprising turn of events in December 2022, following plea negotiations, the lawyers for the accused handed over a significant portion of the stolen jewels to the police in exchange for lighter sentences. However, several key pieces, including the white diamond and the epaulette containing the Saxon white, remain missing. The recovered items were damaged, likely from being cleaned of their mounting materials in preparation for recutting.